I will call the special meeting of the Inland Wetlands Watercourse Agency to order. Seating of alternates, Sue, would you please serve for Marjorie tonight? Thank you very much. We do not have any minutes to approve at this time. We do not have any new applications for receipt and determination of significance. That moves on to public hearing of the application CC 2602 of SL Simsbury. Open.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair. I just have a few introductory slides just to make sure everyone's on the same page for the procedural for tonight. So before you is CC number 26-02-200 Hot Meadow, also known as Hartford South. This is a continuation of the public hearing. The proposed redevelopment is approximately 125 acre parcel for a 689 unit site with associated parking and other improvement areas. The applicant explained there is no direct soil disturbance. Regulated activities within the URA includes pavement removal, stormwater management features, and sections of roadway. The total work is totaled approximately 3.76 acres in the URA. So the application timeline, it was determined a potentially significant application on March 17th, 2026. Also at that meeting, it was deemed a large and complex project and required the services of a third-party reviewer. Public hearing opened on May 5th. It has 35 days to close, which is today, June 9th. The date, once closed, a decision must be rendered 35 days after the close of a public hearing. Extensions are available, but must be agreed to by the applicant. The schedule for tonight, we vote on at the May 19th meeting. We had an intervener petition submitted. We must vote on that tonight, if it is accepted or not. Then we will have the applicant to provide an overview of their responses to the third-party comments. We also have the third-party reviewer here who will respond, and then public comment. Public comment letters, emails were received today through 4 o'clock. All of them were included on the Dropbox. If it came after 4 o'clock, it will still be included in the record. And that's all I have.
Thank you. So our first order of business is to vote on the intervener application. Did everyone have a chance to review the letter from the town attorney? Anyone have any discussion, questions?
So I think this is just a point of sort of logistics. A lot of the comments that were made in that intervener application came early in the process, and several of them have been addressed in the back and forth between the third party and the applicant. And so the only question I was having about that is, we were the attorney logic was that those were sort of already being addressed, so therefore the intervener it didn't have the grounds. But I was just sort of a logistic question. If the intervener filed again because they didn't think that those had been addressed properly, would they have standing? And I was just wondering that as an application question.
So, right, it would go through this same process. We would receive the petition. It would go to our attorney to review to see if it meets the requirements of the state statute. Like he said in his opinion, it has to affirmatively state with evidence that it will unreasonably impair.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else have any further thoughts, comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we find that the intervener petition does not lack does not have standing.
Do we have a second? All in favor? Aye. And next, we'll invite the applicant to present their responses to the third party.
Good evening. Once again, my name is Paul Vitaliano, civil engineer. Is that better?
Yes.
Good evening. Once again, my name is Paul Vitaliano. I'm a civil engineer with VHB. We're located at 100 Great Meadow Road in Weathersfield. As was stated earlier, we received third-party comments and town engineer comments. Those were the two sets we got. We responded back and forth at least twice, I believe 3 times. And as of last Friday, received documentation that we've satisfied all of their comments. Just a quick summary bullet points of some of the things that we did in order to do that. One of them involved a site visit to review the outlets, the drainage outlets. So we did that. VHB did that. Also, additional geotechnical investigations were conducted. We went out there and did some more excavations in a couple areas that we were asked to do that. As a result of those geotechnical investigations, we did redesign a couple of drainage systems, underground infiltration systems. We moved the water quality system, made it above ground instead of underground. All of that outside of the upland review area. Some of the additional things that we did were regarding landscaping. Basically accepted the recommendations of the third-party reviewer regarding removal of some of the cultivars within the upland review. So basically accepted their recommendations on that, and also added significant amount of landscaping along the upland review buffer to the main wetland. If you remember, we called it wetland 6, which was adjacent to the vernal pool area. Significant amount by, instead of having a few clusters of landscaping, we basically landscaped that entire edge and continued that along the eastern part of the site. Final things that we did is we accepted their recommendations to the invasive species management plan. They want us to make some modifications to make it a little more thorough and complete and extend the inspections. So we did that. We accepted those recommendations as well, and some changes to the phasing, basically related to the erosion control. So we addressed our erosion control plans and our phasing plans to address those as well and provide more detail to that. That's basically everything. So just for the record, we received the first letter of comments from the third-party reviewer. I believe there were 36 comments. We responded first time. They came back a second time. We responded 2 other times with just some clarifications. The final one was this past Friday, where we basically acknowledged that we're in concurrence with them, and we received 1 letter from the town engineer, which were incorporated. Mostly kind of the same comments, or concurring with the third-party review comments. We addressed those and received an email from town engineer on Friday, basically deferring certain things that we asked to be deferred to later plan set submissions and like construction level detail on some of the products we're using, and he accepted that those could be deferred to a later time during construction. And having said that, we throw it back to the commission. Happy to answer any questions or however you'd like this to go.
Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have questions at this time?
Yes, about the phasing. One of the comments, the third-party comments, was about phase 1 being dependent upon phase 7. I was sort of unclear about what that meant and how it was resolved. And
sure, it's a very minor comment. Actually, it was we had a piece of a roadway from one phase that would go into the other phase, and basically, unless the phase 7, which was the eastern part, was constructed, that little piece of roadway would have nowhere to drain. So our response to that was just that we would cut that road. I don't know, maybe it was like 50 or 75 feet of like stub of road that goes into that phase. We were just going to cut it back. So that wouldn't be, it'd be included in phase 7 instead of phase 1 instead of phase 7, other way around. Okay. So that's all it was. Okay. Thank you.
I did have one question, not directly related to the third-party review. There's new research, newish research on a chemical that comes out of car tires called 6-PPD-Q. It's extremely detrimental to salmonoids in particular, of which we have a few native species in the river. I was curious if you could address the runoff potential from car tires making it into the river system.
I don't know specifically to that, the chemical makeup that you were saying, but I'll say that from a water quality standpoint, anything that runs off from the site, the first flush, if you will, is going to be captured and infiltrated. That's part of the new stormwater guidelines from the state, where you have to reduce your 2-year storm, which is your smaller storms. So basically, smaller storms, you're going to see very little runoff leaving the site because our outlets to our infiltration systems are higher than the bottoms. So a majority of that water would be captured. Other than that, obviously through our water quality units are going to capture solids as well. And the sumps in our basins and other BMPs that we have throughout the process.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any other questions before we ask a third party to come up?
One question I had in regards to thinking about the alternatives and, prudent alternatives to this complex is, this has come before us previously with a smaller amount of units, and just want to say, is there an alternative where this is a reduction in size where it'd be more palatable to the entire audience here to move forward with?
As you stated, that previous smaller version was denied, so I don't know what that threshold would be. But I could say that from a limits of disturbance standpoint, even though this has more units, this footprint is pulled in tighter than the last one. It's within those limits of disturbance, so it doesn't expand outward into the, beyond those existing disturbed areas. So even though there's more units, it actually is a smaller footprint and doesn't have, and it does increase the pervious area within the upland review by 2 acres. So even though there's more units within it, its expanse from an environmental impact perspective is actually less.
Anybody else? That we'll invite the third party to come up and address their comments.
Hello, members of the commission. Michelle Ford with EcoMaps, and here with Chuck Eaton from CHA. As we discussed at the last meeting, I handled more of the wetlands component where Chuck did the engineering. I'm a certified soil scientist, a registered professional soil scientist, professional wetland scientist, and a certified wildlife biologist. So those are the lens through which I was reviewing these comments. As you're aware, initially, we had our first round of third-party review comments, which included 36 comments and many, many pages that we all enjoyed reading. The applicant addressed many of those comments at the last meeting, and then again in a follow-up with their changes to the plans and their subsequent comments in written review. We then responded to those comments in writing, and then we received today a final response dated June 8th to any of the outstanding comments to which we had responded. So at this time, I believe all comments are addressed, at least from a wetland standpoint. I will let Chuck speak to the engineering components. The remaining outstanding comments that I had and concerns dealt mostly with the invasive species management plan. The plan that they had put together was a little bit vague. It was unclear of what it applied to, what species, the monitoring, the thresholds. They had a 10% threshold for treatment, which was unclear. And so they have completely revamped that protocol for what they're doing. And they are proposing to treat the project area plus 25 feet around the project area. So that seems substantial. They have also included that monitoring would be done monthly, with treatment done monthly for any invasives identified during the growing season for a period of 2 years, which I think is quite substantial. They didn't redo the plan given the timing constraints, but I feel that if the commission can hold them accountable to what they have promised in this as a condition of approval, that you'll have a fairly substantial invasive species management plan that will give a lot of the native vegetation that they're proposing a chance to grow and thrive at the site. They also revised their planting plan to get away from, remember we had those kind of clumped plantings near the vernal pools. They've really expanded that and broadened that. So I was very pleased to see that as well. Overall, like I said, I think everything has been addressed from a wetland standpoint as provided in the written comments. And so I have no further comment. Oh, one additional outstanding measure was that they have attested that they will use natural fiber wrapping for any of their erosion control. So the straw wattles, which can be an entrapment hazard for snakes and many of the amphibians and reptiles that we'll see, especially around those vernal pool areas. So using natural cotton, coir materials is going to be beneficial as well. So.
Hi, everyone. Chuck Eaton, professional engineer with CHA. So like Michelle said, we just got responses to a lot of these comments today, and some of the engineering comments, I believe the responses were that they were either going to amend the plans or amend the plans during future iterations for permitting within the town. Let's see. Sorry, there's quite a few comments. The comment number 11 is a note regarding the inspection ports and the different accessories that come with the infiltration systems. And if the town engineer and the commission are fine with them adding those once the developer chooses which type of infiltration system they are going with, we're fine with that. These different accessories are things like access ports or observation ports, or clean out manholes, things like that. These are important for future maintenance and inspection of the different systems. So they're important because if you don't maintain the systems, they're not gonna continue to function efficiently in the future. So if adding these things at a later date is acceptable to the commission and the town engineer, and maybe Brittany or George could expound on that, then that's fine. And that's also the same for number 12, which has to do with the water quality units. And it's a very similar comment as far as what the manufacturer of the water quality units are, this sort of thing. And ensuring that those water quality units are going to treat the calculated water quality flow and this sort of thing. Comment number 18 was in regards to the phasing. I understand that the applicant has said that they're happy to either take that section of roadway that is currently in phase 1 and move that to phase 7. Personally, my personal opinion would be that would be a good idea to do that, because right now that section of road is part of phase 1, and the water quality treatment for that section of roadway is in phase 7. So you're going from the first phase to the last phase. What happens if we never get to phase 7? Then that section of road does not receive its water quality treatment. So comment number 22 is in regards to one of the revised infiltration systems, which is now a stone trench, and we recommend that that sedimentation erosion control barrier be installed up gradient of that, so that when the loam and seed is growing and being stabilized during that construction period, any construction fines that are in the runoff from that area don't go into the stone trench and clog it up, essentially. And I think that is it. I think all the other comments were fully addressed. So I don't know if you have any questions for myself or Michelle.
Does any of the commission have questions, comments?
So a general question about the 2-year inspection period on the invasive management. You stated that you thought that was a pretty good time range, but I was wondering, given the variation in growing seasons that seem to be occurring more often, is 2 years really enough time to know that the system is stable? And I was just wondering how you got to that number.
2 years is a fairly standard approach. 3 years is better. 5 is great, but this is also a pretty big area that they're going to be treating. The other thing to think of is the context of the site, right? So you have your development footprint, but if you've been to the site and walked around, you see that there's numerous invasives that are surrounding. So there's going to be a lot of pressure for those invasives to come in, whether it's 2 years later or 5 years later. What the 2-year period is really doing is keeping those invasives at bay. And I think that the 2 years will be adequate to do that, to allow all those plants to grow up to a point where they're more mature than some of the invasives that will come in. Eventually invasives will come in, and I would hope that would be part of their landscape management plan when they're doing their regular maintenance. But I think 2 years is adequate to give the plants that they're planting a chance at good survival.
But if they don't establish in those 2 years, and we're having a lot of problems with invasives all across the town, and it's a big piece of property, as you said, and the invasives are an issue for the water quality side of things. So what's the backup plan to know that this is working? You have 2 years and it's not great, but it's not terrible. What's the answer? Like, is there a plan B that gets put into the system for what to do if it's not working at the end of 2 years?
So their plan B was their survivability of the planted plants. And I believe they had an 80%, is that correct? 80% survivability for any of the planted natives. So I think that's reasonable given the number of plants that they're planting. So even with, ensured 80% survivability, you're going to have a fairly dense cover given the revised plant density. So I think that would be kind of the plan B. And then those plants now, and I would ask the applicant perhaps if you have a plant that dies at year 1, does that plant then get monitored for an additional 2 years? Right? Or is it just from the start of construction, they replace anything that dies within those 2 years? So that may be a point of clarification. Typically it's from planting date until, 2 years from that date. It may be difficult to manage individual plants. The commission may wish to consider something a little bit longer, maybe 3 years. But again, I think the 2-year invasive species management plan, that time period is adequate to give those species enough time to survive. If they're seeing that a lot of plants are dying off, you typically would see that either in a certain area or a certain species. They may recommend changing that out to a different species and say, hey, we're not going to just keep planting the same plant that's dying. Let's make some substitutions. That would either come before the commission or for administrative approval, because ultimately you want to have that native success.
Thank you.
Yep.
Does anyone else have questions, comments for third party? I want to say thank you from the commission for all the work. It's greatly appreciated.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for reading it, if you did.
With that, we're going to move on to public comments. Just a couple of housekeeping items on that. If you could keep the comments related to wetlands and conservation issues, that's what we have jurisdiction over. I will ask that you keep comments to 5 minutes or less. And we do have a sign-up sheet, so I'll go through that first before we open the floor up to anyone that may have missed it. If there's no objections from the commission. Nope. Okay. First up, I have Ellen Gilbert. And if you could please state your name and street as you come up. I know you're a pro.
Good evening. My name is Ellen Gilbert. I live at 126 Hot Meadow Street, Unit 3E. Talcott Acres is the condo complex, and we are adjacent to the property in question. So, good evening, commissioners, Simsbury staff, petitioners, public. The ridge at Talcott Mountain South is a deeply complex and controversial proposal, and I'm really pleased to see that the footprint is actually smaller than the Hartford had, and the berm and the plant life between Talcott Acres Condo Association and the ridge will remain undisturbed. The overall impact of the project on the environment is still a lose-lose situation. The scientists and engineers have evaluated the wetlands, the vernal pools, stormwater management, amphibians, flora. If all the plans went exactly as written on paper, perhaps the environmental impact would be limited. A combat copter pilot once told me to always prepare for it to not go as planned. We need to look at the big picture. The Silverman Group is using Statute 830G to get their way of development, regardless of the overall effect on the 124 acres of our town. The application CC 26-02 plans for 689 rentals, but in my estimation, there's nowhere near that many interested renters. The town already has many vacant rentals. The town will lose precious woodlands adjacent to Hot Meadow Street, the ones we drive right by every day on Hot Meadow Street, those beautiful, big, huge pine trees. There will be a pollution risk so close to Minister Brook, the Farmington River, and the vernal pools. There's no guarantee of protection. The ability of Aquarian and the Water Pollution Control Authority to manage the demand are unknown. I made calls to both offices. I could not get a figure on the water consumption by the Hartford Insurance Company, but the facility had 1,500 employees working days and evenings on weekdays. The 689 households will create a demand far greater. Consider cooking, dishwashing, laundry, bathing, hygiene needs, and toilet use with an occupation of 1 to 2 or 3 to 5 people in those units. The aquifer is directly across the river from the proposed development, and our climate is unpredictable. I moved to the multi-use Hartford form-based plan that could result in the reduction in that water demand. And I'll tell you, I came up with this one night between the time I went to bed and 4 o'clock in the morning. It was all I could think about until I wrote it down. So commercial aspects could replace the income of too many rental residences. Rather than a restaurant and a hidden strip mall, I propose the following. Please include housing tailored for seniors and units designated for accessible housing. Section 811, supportive housing for people with disabilities. Sprouts Grocery Store. This is the latest in a concept in grocery stores. I have seen it in several states that I've been in the last 6 months. They plan to bring 8 of these Sprouts stores to Connecticut, and one this week was documented as approved for Fairfield. We could use a Chick-fil-A. And then breakfast and lunch dining for residents, for sports teams, the hockey teams, the tennis teams that are just across the street from the North development. Also for bicyclists and walkers. We need to preserve our natural beauty, keep as many trees as possible on the property, plan for greater protection of our wetlands and watercourses. I ask that the plan needs to be scaled back and adjusted to better preserve what is good for the future users of the land and for us. Thank you to all the many professionals, and I know there are many, many, who have worked on this plan, and for people who have reviewed it, volunteers who have taken their time to consider this, and to the public who have expressed their caring. Let's make this project a win-win. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Next up, I have Diane Nash.
Mine is brief. Diane Nash, 5 Marywood. When 830G was enacted with the lofty purpose of creating more opportunity for housing to the less affluent, it was not meant to be used as a weapon to provide wealth to developers
If you guys could please hold your applause and let the speaker speak. I appreciate it.
It was not meant to be misused while destroying our resources that are needed and are beneficial to all. This application is a perfect example of the misuse of 830G. And what is interesting is we're taking it apart to ask you to approve different things, different parts, different management. At the same time, FEMA is expanding their 100-year floodplain. Half of the people probably in this room have already gotten an increase in their insurance because they're considered now in wetlands. Not floodplain, wetlands. We're paying extra because we're being told that the environment is changing. And we're sitting here pondering how to fix things that we shouldn't have to fix. Our floodplain, our to have extra storm sewers and catch basins to mitigate harm. I'm telling you, you ought to turn down this application because your first obligation is to do no harm.
Thank you. Next up, I have Christine Sinopoli.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yep. Christine Sinopoli, 16 Clay Creek Drive, Suffield, Connecticut. First, again, I want to thank the commission for their diligence and hard work. At the last meeting, thank you for allowing the NOI, Notice of Intervention, to be entered into the record and for review by the commission and the town attorney. My purpose for filing the NOI was to ensure the administrative record is complete, that all necessary data is obtained, and that all environmental issues that the commission has jurisdiction over are fully evaluated before a final decision is made. At the May 19th meeting, where I presented my intervention, Attorney Donahue requested the commission to deny or strike the intervention as legally insufficient. And then tonight, the commission, a motion was made stating that the intervener does not have standing, and I believe it was unanimous. Therefore, I want to state, one, the submission was properly verified. It was notarized. 2, the statute clearly states in any administrative proceeding that any person can submit an intervention. This is 22A-19. The intervention becomes effective at the time of filing. The law does not say it is effective upon approval. The commission does not have the authority to reject the intervention. And I also want to note that I do not believe that I heard the commission state the legal basis for denying me, Christine Sinopoli, standing as an intervener. Furthermore, court decisions such as the Connecticut 2007 Windell, W-I-N-D-E-L versus Environmental Protection Commission supports the principle that favors citizens, average people like me, to have standing and participation to identify unresolved environmental deficiencies, even if an agency approves an activity. But moving on. Next, I just want to make a reminder that the application must meet the requirements of Connecticut General Statutes 22A-41 and the Simsbury Inland Wetlands and Watercourses regulations to show the applicant's proposed activity will not harm the wetlands. Based on the town's own third-party review, we have the first round of May 4th and the second round dated June 4th. These two documents, I respectfully still do not believe the record yet supports the applicant's case that the wetlands will not be adversely affected and that it contains the evidence to support all findings required under Connecticut Statute 22A-41. First and most significantly, it's about comment 24, which deals with wetland hydrology. The applicant's engineers, VHB, rely on generalized peak flow comparisons and broad design points. VHB shows peak flow compliance, water quality compliance, but VHB did not demonstrate wetland hydrologic protection. They basically say that their design does a lot of good stuff, like it reduces impervious watershed, it increases nearby pervious areas, restores almost 2 acres of upland habitat, and a couple other things, which all sounds like good ecological reasoning. But per CHA's letter of May 4th, they requested hydrologic evaluation, and I quote, an evaluation of how changes in stormwater flow and distribution will affect hydrology of individual wetlands, particularly 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So I don't really understand how CHA, per its 6/4/26 letter, concludes that this is addressed. I've read through the documents on the public record, and as I understand them, the applicant has applied a qualitative ecological narrative. I believe the record is still missing evidence such as groundwater and recharge analyses, water budget evaluation and analyses, quantification of recharge changes, hydro period or saturation modeling, seasonal storage estimates, and hydrologic impact assessment. Again, this is important to get right, and have a stellar plan for these 689 units because stormwater systems change where the water goes, how fast it gets there, whether it reaches the wetlands, and this poses a danger to the wetlands. Regarding hydrology, the applicant presented a qualitative argument why their engineers believe the developments.
It's been 5 minutes. If you could summarize and wrap up, be appreciated. Thank you.
Regarding hydrology, the applicant presented a qualitative argument why their engineers believe the development's impacts will be positive, but it is largely based on hydrological assumptions and professional judgment. I hold that the town deserves quantitative data and facts to support the applicant's conclusion. An analogy would be the building of a bridge. A qualitative statement would be, we expect the bridge to be safe. A quantitative statement would be, Here are the calculations of how much the bridge can carry and the data loads that we analyzed. Because if the engineer is wrong, there can be serious consequences. Wetlands are similar. Qualitative statements would be things like, wetland hydrology will be maintained, the project is expected to improve habitat, the reduction in impervious surface will benefit wetlands. Those are different types of statements than objective data of quantitative statements that answer questions like, how much water will reach wetlands post-construction? How much groundwater recharge will increase or decrease? Will a vernal pool hold H2O for the same duration as today? Will the wetlands support the same plant and animal communities in 5 years or in 10 years? As I read it, VHB's response is still lacking and is not sufficient in relation to the Commission's obligation under Connecticut Statute 22A-4A3 to consider, quote, the relationship between the short-term and long-term impacts of the proposed regulated activity on wetlands and watercourses and the maintenance and enhancement of long-term productivity of such wetlands and watercourses. As I see it, the commission/agency is being asked to accept predictions without being shown measurable evidence. I believe the applicants need to provide the data and let the commission see the magnitude of changes. The applicant's engineers may be correct, but the town deserves to see the quantitative evidence, not just a qualitative ecological rationale. In my written testimony that I submitted today, dated June 9th, 2026, I also had some comments write up on comment 30 and 35 and 18 and 11 and 12. So I won't go into them. But to sum it up, this is a huge, huge project. It's 689 units, all to be hydrologically connected to 47 acres of wetlands. The Farmington River Corridor, Minister Brook, Nod Brook. I believe the record still lacks quantitative data to eliminate uncertainty. Uncertainty that the wetlands will not be adversely impacted long-term. Because stormwater systems can fail, maintenance plans can change, invasive species management programs can be abandoned, plantings can fail, hydrologic assumptions can be proven wrong. But the wetlands have no margin for error. The applicant needs to do all of his homework and get an A. Requiring the quantitative data is a step towards eliminating uncertainty regarding the wetlands' long-term productivity. The applicant's engineers believe the project will function as intended, and the third-party review has identified reasons to believe that it may. But still, several of the most important conclusions, hydrology, wetlands function, the invasive species management program, and especially long-term system performance rest primarily on a narrative of professional judgment rather than measurable analyses. I believe that the statutory burden of proof has not yet been satisfied. For all of these aforestated reasons stated here and in my letter submitted today, which I asked to be included in the official administrative record, I ask that the commission require the additional analyses necessary to demonstrate compliance with Connecticut Statute 22A-41 before approval is granted or deny the application. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next, I have Chris Barnett.
Chris Barnett, 15 Oxyoke Drive. Just vote no. The Farmington River, a federally designated wild and scenic waterway, is being assaulted from both sides by development proposals that will permanently alter the character and environment of our town. This is not a debate about whether Simsbury needs housing. As a local realtor, I understand all too well the challenges many families face in finding suitable housing. What our community desperately needs are middle market, owner-occupied homes and additional senior living options, not more large-scale rental developments.
Please hold your applause. Let the speakers speak.
The story of conservation in Simsbury began more than a century ago with visionaries such as Gifford Pinchot, the Eno family, and George McLean, who recognized the importance of protecting our natural resources for future generations. Their efforts laid the foundation for conservation in our community, including the creation of McLean Game Refuge, which remains one of Connecticut's most important ecological treasures. In addition, since its founding in 1970, the Simsbury Land Trust has protected thousands of acres of open space, preserving wildlife corridors, wetlands, forests, scenic landscapes that define our community, enhance the quality of life, much of it done with private funding. As development pressures continue throughout our region and new proposals come before our local boards and commissions, the work of conservation has never been more important. We all have a responsibility to protect the character, beauty, and natural resources that make Simsbury such a special place to live. It is time for residents to take back control of our town and send a clear message that we will not allow developers to exploit loopholes in flawed state laws to advance projects that the public overwhelmingly does not support. Despite repeated concerns raised by residents, state leaders have failed to address these loopholes, leaving communities like ours vulnerable to developments that dramatically reshape our landscape. Please do not be swayed by promises that cannot be guaranteed over the long term. While developers may offer assurances today, there is no practical way to ensure that future owners will maintain the same standards of environmental stewardship, property management, or operational oversight. Nor does the town have the resources or authority to effectively monitor and mitigate environmental impacts decades into the future. The decisions we make today will have lasting consequences. Once wetlands are disturbed, wildlife habitats fragmented, traffic increased, and open space lost, those impacts cannot be reversed. We owe it to future generations to be thoughtful stewards of the natural resources that previous generations worked so hard to protect. For the sake of our river, our environment, our community character, and the future generations, I urge you to all vote no.
Thank you. Next, I have Chris Sesta. Chris Sesta.
Good evening, commissioners. Good evening, fellow neighbors. I am a recent newly resident of Simsbury. My adult daughter and I have lived, voted, and been here as active members of this community for the past 4 years. Prior to moving here, we were lifelong residents in West Hartford, Connecticut.
Do you mind just identifying yourself and your address for the record?
Yes, Chris Sesta,
And your address.
10 Misaka Street,
Thank you.
Unit K, Simsbury, Connecticut. Prior to moving here, we were lifelong residents in West Hartford. And I don't know if anybody here has seen West Hartford lately. It's mighty different than it has been 20 years ago. We chose Simsbury specifically for its character, its natural beauty, sense of peace, and more thoughtful pace of growth. Our experience in West Hartford left us deeply concerned about the long-term consequences of excessive development, including increased traffic, strain on infrastructure. You want to talk water drains. Our neighbors, since the building of all the buildings that were happening in West Hartford and the increase of the infrastructure, we couldn't keep up with the size of our drains that are underneath the streets as quickly as they were building all of these new buildings. We ended up with only 6 inches of flooding backed up in our cellar. Our neighbors had 4 feet. Yes. This included the increase in the traffic, the strain on the infrastructure, and a growing tax burden that gradually altered the quality of life that once defined the town of West Hartford. Having witnessed those changes firsthand, we are very dismayed by the proposed Silverman Group housing development and concerned, very concerned, about the precedent such a large-scale project could set for the future of Simsbury. We understand that the town may have limited authority to prevent this proposal from moving forward. Nonetheless, we felt that it was important for us today to add our voices to the many residents who oppose the project and who hope to preserve the unique quality and livability of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Mary Fish Arango.
I'm Mary Fish Arango. I live at 26 Woodlot Road, West Simsbury. Thank you for having this process. Thank you all for participating in this process. There are decisions you can't take back once you've taken action. The decision to drive while intoxicated and its unintended consequences. The decision to take down a stand of 150-year-old trees. The decision to turn a blind eye to recklessness or cruelty that causes harm for generations. The decision to underestimate or minimize predictions about chemicals that become used habitually to maximize profits or convenience. As I optimistically water tomato plants in the early morning cool, I do not see the indigo bunting to know it is there. I don't need to see it. I don't need to see the 35 species of birds that welcome sunrise. Black bears, white-tailed deer, foxes, and turkeys crossed our yards as I slept. Our dog's pace and patterns, nose to the ground, tell me so. Our family returned, 3 generations of us, to Connecticut, the state of our childhood and young adult years, 4 years ago. We had spent 25 years teaching in California and Oregon. We thought we might be there forever. Wildfire became its own extended season. Mudslides in California swept away a father and his daughter, our former student torn from her brother's arms. Fire in southern Oregon threatened our property from 3 directions at once, less than a mile away. Fire traveled 11 miles in 4 hours and decimated 2,500 homes. 3 of our neighbors' wells had failed due to drought. There are decisions you can't make amends for later, decisions that will outlive us forever. There are apologies you can't make to families downriver or generations in the future. Given the opportunity to protect and preserve, it is a privilege to decide with extreme caution, prudently in anticipation of an unknown future and on behalf of those who come after us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Matthew Burton.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Burton, 19 Lost Brook Road, West Simsbury, Connecticut. Good evening. My name is Matthew Burton, and I've been a Simsbury resident my entire life. I was born and raised here, attending Tooten Hills Elementary all the way through Simsbury High, class of 2018. I have also had the unique privilege of working on Hot Meadow Street since I was 16 years old, first at 133 and now at 82. In fact, I remember when the old Hartford building was demolished. Many of us grew up hearing stories from our parents and grandparents about when Simsbury was largely tobacco fields and farms. Those days are long gone and communities naturally evolve. But I worry that in the not too distant future, we may find ourselves saying, remember when Simsbury was defined by its rich resources and wildlife and not by its overdevelopment. I understand and appreciate the need for housing, and I recognize that growth is inevitable. I'm not here to oppose growth. Rather, I hope that growth is pursued in a way that respects and preserves the environmental resources that make Simsbury such a remarkable place to live. The wetlands, streams, forests, and wildlife habitats throughout our town are not simply targets and numbers on a spreadsheet waiting for the next project. They protect water quality, provide habitat for countless species, help mitigate flooding, and contribute to the character and beauty that have attracted generations of residents of Simsbury. I'm concerned that development of this scale has the potential to place significant pressure on these resources. While buildings and roads can always be constructed, once sensitive wetlands and habitats are altered, they are often impossible to fully restore. For that reason, I respectfully ask that every effort be made to reduce the intensity of this proposal. I believe there is a path forward that balances the need for housing with the responsibility to protect our natural resources. Rather than hundreds of apartment units, I hope serious consideration can be given to smaller scale development consisting of modest single-family homes that better reflect the character of Simsbury and place less strain on the surrounding environment. One of my fondest memories of this community took place right here in this building when residents came together to preserve the historic tobacco barns. I remember the pride we all felt in protecting a piece of Simsbury's heritage. Tonight, I hope we can show some of that same commitment to preserving another part of our heritage, our natural environment. The Inland Wetlands Commission has an important responsibility to ensure that development proceeds thoughtfully and that the long-term impacts on our wetlands and watercourses are carefully considered. I respectfully ask that you exercise that responsibility with the same care and diligence that generations of Simsbury residents have come to expect. We owe that responsibility not only to those who call Simsbury home today, but to those who will call it home in the future. I welcome new neighbors, and I look forward to showing them the beauty of Simsbury firsthand. My hope is that future generations will be able to experience that beauty for themselves, rather than simply hear us say, "I remember when." And I'll leave you with these words. Growth can be managed, buildings can be replaced, but the character of Simsbury is not for sale, and once it is lost, no amount of money can buy it back. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Deborah Bernard.
Good evening. I'm going to try and I'm not going to repeat anything that's been said, but I agree with most of it. People are very thoughtful in this town. I appreciate the intelligence of the commission. Could you just identify
yourself and your
and the
address
public,
for the record?
of course.
Thank you.
Deborah Bernard, 26 Metacom, Simsbury 06070. And I guess if I started at the beginning, that would be a good place, right? I speak to you tonight as a resident and also a national marketing consultant who works with home builders for my day job. So I've worked on thousands of new home projects between California and here and distant places like Missouri and little infill developments in West Hartford. I understand everyone speaking tonight, and they've sometimes worked for me, and sometimes we've worked together on a team. My consulting company, the Bernard Partnership, is headquartered here in Simsbury, and I've been in the business 35 years. This project deserves all of the attention it's getting, both from a wetlands and a zoning and a planning viewpoints. Important personally. I know the people behind me have worked hours on this, and I totally sympathize because I've been in that chair. I bring to you tonight some experience. The density on this project is at 18 units to the acre, and that's on the gross developable acreage, which is a fairly high-dense, multi-story, as you know, site plan. The Wetlands Commission that's actually been to my street to evaluate our fire pond, and I thank Brittany and her team for doing that, is pretty diligent. So I'm hopeful that on this evaluation, you all will be as diligent. You know, we talked about, 5 feet of reeds around this little fire pond. So it took about 5 meetings. I'm sure you guys will spend hundreds of hours on this. I really appreciate that. I totally echo everyone's feelings about the future. We can't predict it. We can't predict the environment. We can't predict politics. We can't predict the waterway. And so all of the studies, I think, need to be future forward. Like, what is it like in 2050? And if we can't answer that question, we should not approve this project. So where's it at in 30 years? There's a lot of details. I'm not going to get in the weeds. All the engineers can do that. That's their job. The balance of nature and nurture, I guess, is where we're all trying to get to, right? What is the balance of nature and development and housing and people's rights? Sometimes in our market studies, which we kind of do as a routine, people segment the country, in terms southeast, the west, the northwest, and all that stuff. in New Jersey, and I say this in all due respect because my mother's a Garibaldi who grew up in Jersey City, so I love New Jersey and New York, but New Jersey is sometimes thought of as the California of the East. And the reason it's thought of that is because development is more dense there and the population is broader. And we're like just a little town here. So I suspect that we should be regarded that way. Couple of things, and then I think I'll sign off here. 830G, interesting law, as everyone has talked about. Sometimes it's a backlash proposal. There's a good one that comes before a city or a town. It's usually less units. I've seen it coast to coast. It doesn't get approved, and then the next stage is we're gonna go 830G, and it's always a difficult fight. And there's got to be a compromise in there somewhere, and maybe there is, and maybe there's not. But it sometimes is a legal avenue more than a developmental sensitivity. So I guess I'll leave that with the commission. We're looking for sensitivity. We're looking for environmental stewardship. And I guess respect of the public. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next, I have Alan Rosenberg.
Thank you. I'd like to request that ask that my request to speak be waived. I'm going to not speak this evening. I'll speak at the My apologies. Alan Rosenberg, 87 Blue Ridge Drive. I'm asking that I not speak this evening. I will be speaking at the zoning hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Raymond Hanley.
Hi, Raymond Hanley, 14 Westcott. Thanks for this opportunity here. I have a couple of things to say. The first thing is pretty basic, and I'll just amplify that. The river has attained wild and scenic, federal wild and scenic designation. I know you know that. Bears repeating. I come to you because I hear the engineers. I've seen what engineers work on, and I've seen their plans be implemented, and then the maintenance of these things goes away. And as far as stormwater systems, one thing that wasn't mentioned, other things that will happen on those impermeable surfaces is car washing and those forever chemicals that are going to be in those compounds that they're using. But they have marvelous means of creating protections for the water, for the water environment, or the wetlands and everything else. But the catch basins, the traps, the different methods that are used are reliant on periodic maintenance. And if nobody's watching, I've been in maintenance for 40 years. I understand where the cuts get made. And similar to the invasive species discussion, without the maintenance, these things become useless. And I think that in the proposals, I of course hope that the commission denies this on the basis of water usage and other things as mentioned. But certainly the maintenance is not going to be done if nobody's watching. So there has to be oversight. The fire marshal will be in those buildings, and certain things will happen. But maintenance of those stormwater drains and civilly engineered methods will not happen after a certain amount of time unless there's diligence paid there. And then I've missed some meetings. I'm not sure if they're providing their own sewage water treatment, or if it's dependent on our municipal system. But 689 units is a shock to our system, I'm sure. And certainly the margins, you add up all the fixture units and then the stormwater discharge. Well, that won't go there, but I would expect that there would be some very strict investigation of the capacity of the the sewage water treatment at our facility, which all of the facilities in the state are aging. They were great. They were put in place in the 70s, and many of them are not up to the task anymore. And that's about all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, I have Margaret Reed. Margaret Reed. Going once, going twice.
Is this okay?
I was gonna, have you already signed up?
Is there somebody?
Yeah, we've got a list.
Oh, okay. I'll wait then.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Next I have Michelle Rotundo.
Good evening, Michelle Rotundo, 4 Adams Road, Weetog. Dear Commission members, my name is Michelle Rotundo and I'm a 10-year resident of Simsbury, living here with my husband and 3 young children. In 2016, we chose Simsbury, not West Hartford, as a place to establish our family because of the town charm, connection to nature, and open space. I also worked at the former Hartford Insurance Office building for 5 years until it was sold and demolished. And I remember walking around that campus and sitting in the beautiful courtyard, admiring all the nature and local wildlife that will now be destroyed. In 2024, I'll remind you, our town denied Silverman Group's mixed-use proposal for 432 units on the claim that the scale was inappropriate for the area and it did not provide enough benefit to our town. A decision, by the way, that was later upheld by a Superior Court judge. One can argue that Silverman, who was clearly exploiting our town for the benefit of lining their pockets, is now acting with complete disregard for that judge's decision and has escalated rather than responded to local concerns, which led to that initial denial.
Please hold the applause.
We now have an application that is 1.6 times larger, solely residential, and it creates even more concerns around environmental impact, conservation, and the obvious concerns around population increase, traffic, schools, infrastructure, town resources, and community character. 2 big concerns I believe have not been clearly addressed in the response to the third-party review letter, who I would like to remind is paid for by the applicant. So let's think about some conflicts of interest there. Relate to the hydrologic conditions. I know Christine mentioned this already. And stormwater management, in particular comment 24, where the response provides a conceptual explanation of why the applicant believes wetland hydrology will be maintained. To summarize, it does not provide the hydrologic analysis requested by the staff. It's incomplete. Therefore, the original concern is only partially resolved, and I urge the Commission to obtain clarification before making a decision. I also urge the Commission to deem the 765-page stormwater management report, or at least part of the report related to the test pit results. I don't think this has been talked about in the meetings that I've been to, but I believe this should be deemed inconclusive based on ineffective testing methods. And the Commission should demand that the applicant conduct another observation of all 22 test pits before making a decision. As background here, Silverman hired GEI consultants to conduct site hydrology tests. 16 of the 22 test pits were dug in January during frozen ground conditions in the middle of winter. This is not an effective testing time, and it does not accurately represent typical groundwater conditions, as frozen soil restricts infiltration and groundwater levels are typically lowest in the winter. So by no surprise, all 16 test pits in January did not reveal groundwater intrusion. When GEI went back to dig 6 additional test pits in May, lo and behold, 3 of them showed groundwater intrusion. A question I posed to the Commission: if the soil testing expert GEI was there digging again in May, why didn't they redig the original 16 frozen test pits for a more effective test result? I urge the commission to please request another observation of all 22 test pits during normal soil conditions for a thorough evaluation before rendering a decision. Thank you for your time and service to our community.
Thank you. Next, I have Olivia Kelsey. Olivia Kelsey.
I can't help myself here for the last person that made comments. The third party company was not chosen by the applicant. The third party was chosen by the commission with town recommendations. It was there were two companies that responded to a quote. It is paid for by the applicant, but it was chosen by us. So the allegation that there was collusion is offensive to me personally. So just want to put that out there.
Okay, I have to hurry up and go home to feed my kids. My name's Olivia Kelsey. I reside at 10 Andrew Weetog. Good evening. My name is Olivia. My husband and I live in Simsbury with our 2 daughters. They are the reason why we chose to live here. We chose Simsbury because of its timeless beauty, the open space, the wildlife, because it feels like the Simsbury it's always been. That's why I'm here tonight. I honestly don't understand why we would be willing to take this risk. I keep hearing about what this project will bring. What I don't hear enough about is what it will cost us. The wetlands, the wildlife, the open space, the things that make this town special. The blue-spotted salamander, home to Simsbury, is a state-protected species. Connecticut Deep says it needs protection. Yet we're supposed to believe that the years of construction, noise, pollution, and people moving through this area won't affect it? I don't believe that. And honestly, I'm tired of hearing the same thing every time a new development comes along. We're told it will be okay. We're told there won't be much impact. We're told not to worry, but somehow there's always more traffic, more building, more strain on our schools and town services, and a little less of the Simsbury people moved here for. Besides the fact the building on the wetlands can cause severe risks and dangerous mold, removing wetlands is removing a natural sponge that protects against flooding. These changes don't happen overnight. They happen one project at a time, one approval at a time, one piece of land at a time. And the people pushing these projects won't be the ones living with the results. We will. Our children will. My daughters don't get a vote. They don't get to sit up here. They are counting on us to make good decisions for them. So let me ask you this. Who's going to look back in 20 years from now and say, I wish Simsbury had fewer wetlands? Who's going to say, I wish we had done less to protect the wildlife? Who's going to say, I wish we had been less careful? Nobody. But people may look back and wonder why nobody stood up and said enough. You have the power to protect this town. If not here, then where? If not now, then when? Because if we're not willing to protect a state-protected species, our wetlands, and our natural beauty that drew so many of us here to this in the first place, then what exactly is the point of having these protections at all? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Mary, and I can't make out the last name. It looks like it begins with an R. If Mary, last name begins with R. Do we have a Mary? I can't make out the last name. It looks like it begins with R. Going once, going twice. Moving on, I have John and Betty Oakes.
We defer to the next speaker.
Okay, thank you. That would be Beth Ballantine.
Hi, I'm Beth Ballantine. You guys have heard from me before, 31 Metacom Drive. I wrote some notes. I just want to say, first of all, I want to thank the Wetlands Committee for all the work you do. And I know in some ways, your hands are tied and you have to abide by the laws and everything. And I know that each and every one of you are on this committee because you care deeply about our environment. So I know you're doing what you can. So anyway, so thank you. I'm going to reiterate some of the things people said, but I'll try to make it quick. I'm not an environmental scientist, but when the developer talked about this being a smaller footprint than the Hartford, so there'll be less environmental impact, I do not think that's the case. This is a very different project than the Hartford. Very conservatively, there's going to be 1,000 cars, 1,000 showers, bathrooms, 700 dishwashers, kitchens. It is a much different animal, which I know you're aware of. I'm also very concerned about the discussion about backup plan. You asked a question about what's your backup plan. Adverse effects are permanent. I'm more concerned about what will happen through the years, capturing water, et cetera, rather than what's going to happen when this is first built. The environmental professional, Christine Sinopoli, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I am very concerned about her comments about missing evidence of hydrology. And that the developer is using assumptions and not enough quantitative data, which I feel like is essential in this case. I am here myself tonight, but I'm representing 4 generations of people in town. My in-laws, my mom, all in their 80s, my kids, my grandkids. My daughter was actually here and she was thinking of staying, but I don't think you want her 6 and 2-year-old running around during this. But they're here and they care. I am I'm all for affordable housing. I honestly wouldn't mind if 100% of this project was affordable. I personally know people out of town who would love to own here. They want to share the precious beauty that we enjoy. What I think this town needs is, making home ownership more affordable and possible, rather than cramming as many people as possible into mostly very expensive luxury units. Giving these people no opportunity to build equity. This is not to help anybody, but the developer. We all understand what's going on. We know that developers taking advantage of state 830G affordable housing laws for one reason, to optimize profits. They came from out of state to find a relatively cheap opportunity at the Hartford site to build and make some money. And, that's what they do. And I think that we all realize that. And I think that we need to do everything in our power to preserve our town and our wetlands. And anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, I think it's another Mary. I can't make out the full name, but it looks like it starts with Mary A, maybe. Anyone? Going once? Going twice? Leslie Coswig. Leslie Coswig here. Nope. Dave Jackson. Thank you.
I'm Dave Jackson. I live at 15 Quarry Road in Simsbury. I have only one request before we start. If I get booed, could you stop everybody?
I will certainly do my best.
Okay, I'll try not to get booed. I couldn't agree more with what I've heard in this room. But I also want to say that Beth's comment about the respect level that we have for the commission, because the commission is the town. And you voted, I guess you were voted in, but there's a lot of respect for you guys. And it's going to be tough because you've got a mass of people behind here that are very, very, very involved in their lives in this town, trying to do the best thing they can for themselves, for their neighbors, and for the town. And it's unfortunate for you. You're seeing raw emotion, and please don't take it personal. I know we all do. So I want to just say what Beth had said. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And you have a tough job here, but please don't take it personal. Now I'm going to go into this stuff, and that's where I'm going to get booed. But I do want to say that I don't know the Silverman Group, and I don't know the third party. And quite frankly, Silverman Group, I don't really care to know all that much from what I've heard. But what I would like to say is that I do know everybody behind me in this room, because everybody behind me in this room are the people that I live with and the people that I drive past every day and hope that they don't cut in front of me, and they're the people at the grocery store. But this room, I would like to call this, what was the third party, whatever that was. This is the first party right here in the back of the room. And the reason I say that is that I have yet to have a conversation with one person that has told me that they think that, and I'm sorry about the third party evaluation, I thought it was pretty rosy, that it's not going to impact the wetlands. It's going to impact the town in a million ways, and I don't thank the Silverman Group for that. I didn't hear very good things about you tonight. But I do want to say that common sense has to apply. And when you apply the numbers of the people behind me, that it doesn't lie. When you talk to people, they're upset about this. And I don't know one person that can tell you with a modicum of common sense that this plan will not harm the wetlands. It's going to harm a lot of things, but it will definitely harm the wetlands. So please don't take that personal. They really believe it. And I can't imagine that it's going to be good for the wetlands, despite what the third parties seem to say. But it's just common sense. So I just want to say that the first party is right here behind me. And it's really, when you look at the numbers and then you extrapolate that many people talking, and I ask you, you're in the streets too, what are you hearing? I do not hear people in favor of this project in any shape, manner, form, other than, yeah, let's get some housing for folks. We can all argue about that, but nobody says it's going to be good for the environment or for the wetlands. And I do want to throw one other thing in there, collateral damage. I don't know if this particular viewpoint that you're looking at says, we're just looking at these wetlands. How will it impact that? All the trucks, all the noise, all the cars that will be going through. And I love those comments about 30, 40 years from now, we're going to turn into West Hartford. I love that. But I do want to say that not only is this wetland, you talk to the common person. That's what you do. And there are 100 of them back here and hundreds past there. Nobody thinks that this is going to be good for the environment. It can't be. It can only be negative, no matter what anybody says. That's too much. But anyway, I do want to finish off by saying thank you. I know it's a tough job, but it's highly personally charged. People love their town, and people love the wetlands. Personally, I love the whole town, and this wetlands is a particular part of it. And I just want to say thank you to everybody here, but also thank you to the first party behind me, the citizens.
Thank you. Next, I have Lori Boyko.
Hi, I'm Lori Boyko, and I'm not going to give you my address because I'm not spilling that all over video on the internet anymore. This entire proposal, from both a wetlands and a conservation perspective, needs to be an emphatic no in all respects. I know it, you know it, and everyone in this room knows it, including the developer. The issue is that all of us who have lived in town for decades know the importance and sensitivity of the wetlands on the property. Even more so those who live adjacent and have dealt with the shifting and saturation of the wetlands as surrounding properties have been extensively developed. But the private equity company with the deep pockets to hire extensive teams of employees who don't know don't know we don't have a furniture store in town, but somehow seem to be able to pinpoint with precision the fact that their engineering won't harm our natural resources while they sit smugly back in their New Jersey offices with gold in their pockets is no match for the residents and our small government to stand against. We are literally looking at a case of David versus Goliath. The length of this property is adjacent to the Farmington River. That river isn't just wild and scenic, and it isn't just recreational. My family literally eats out of that river. My 3 Eagle Scouts regularly provide dinner directly from the Farmington, which contains both shad and trout. Due to a spill of fire-suppressing foam into the river in 2019, an advisory was placed by the Department of Public Health and the Department of Environmental Protection to limit the amount of fish consumption from PFAS contamination. The river and the wildlife in it remains to this day vulnerable to any additional potential contamination to it or to the adjacent wetlands. So does our food supply. The developer stated that they will limit the application of pesticides to their properties to only certain months of the year. The absurdity of that is astounding. They keep reiterating that this project will not expand beyond the footprint of the existing impervious surface. What is being completely overlooked is that they have already built impervious surface well beyond the footprint that was in place when the Hartford was there. The ridge at Talcott Mountain Apartments, developed by this same money, did not exist when the Hartford was on site. Nor did Anthology Assisted Living or the 11,000 plus of retail space and all of the parking lots and driveways around them. That land was a 30-plus acre cornfield. It is now separated by an arbitrary lot line on a map, but it was and is very much a part of what they're now attempting to develop. That additional development on the Hartford property alone has an impact on the wetlands, so to claim they aren't going beyond the footprint of the original Hartford on this project is simply disingenuous and really somewhat deceptive. Simsbury and state maps show that the entirety of this proposed behemoth of a development is located in the deep, local, regional, and sub-regional basin where rain or snowmelt flows over the land and into the state's watercourses. You know, the snowmelt with the pesticides that were only applied some months of the year. Those basins drain into the primary recharge area of the town aquifer, which is adjacent to the river. Additionally, the vast majority of this property is located in state-designated natural diversity database area of state and federal listed species and critical habitats, which I believe requires a state deep NDDB review if one hasn't been done already, but warrants further review by both Inland Wetlands and Conservation Commission for that reason as well. Lastly, if you even think for 1 second about approving anything with some of the assurances they're making about limiting outdoor water usage, limited lighting or dimmers for dark skies, or any other caveat, get it in writing and get it as big a bond as legally available, because developers never adhere to these verbal assurances and we get stuck with the consequences.
Thank you.
I'm not done.
Oh, continue.
Government exists to protect the rights of individuals, not of giant private equity corporations. It is time to just vote no.
Thank you. Lori was our last signed up. I know we had at least one more gentleman who wanted to speak. So if he would like to come up and if there's anyone behind him.
I didn't come with any prepared notes, and I can't add anything to what these people have so eloquently said.
Could you just identify yourself and your address for the record?
Oh, okay. Oh, you want to know who I am?
Yes.
Can I make up a fake name? No. My name is Wayne Velasquez. I live in Simsbury. I'm not a lifelong resident. I've only been here for 30 years. Okay. So actually 30 years, Ned. So And I live on Hot Meadow Street. So if anybody in this room is affected, it's going to be me more than any of you guys. And I cannot tell you how much I love that all you guys who do not live on Hot Meadow Street are so supportive of this not going through. Okay. And I didn't want to say anything. I didn't have any prepared notes or anything. All I wanted to say was, when I first moved to Simsbury and I drove down Hot Meadow Street, all I saw was greenery. And now everything is apartment buildings and it's all developed and there's hardly any greenery left. And does it all have to go away? Do we have to have apartments, more apartments in Simsbury? Is it absolutely necessary for somebody's benefit? I don't know, I guess for these guys, everybody keeps pointing to them. And again, they don't live here, so it's not going to affect them. I would just want to say, if you've been here for any length of time and you close your eyes and remember what it was like to drive down Hot Meadow Street when it was like greenery. And if you think about that now.
Can you speak into the mic?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
If you think about that now, you can't remember what it used to look like. It just isn't there. So if they're going to go ahead and let this development go on next to us, go ahead and take pictures so you can show your grandchildren what it used to look like in Simsbury before this development thing. And if you guys decide to go through with this thing, then here's my smart ass remark. Where it says Simsbury on the road, when it says Simsbury, just put a little line underneath. Simsbury apartments for rent. And then, because that's what it's going to be. And I just don't think, that's it. I just don't think we should do it. But that's just me. I apologize.
Thank you very much.
I'm Johnny Come Lately. I'm Bob Demesky. I am a lifelong Simsbury resident going back to 1970. We're 20 Butternut Lane in Weetah. And I have two things that I take from the meeting tonight. The first thing, I was curious to hear that we are nearby an aquifer. In 1987, I was president of Citizens for Simsbury, and we had an issue with an aquifer that basically was on the four corners of Avon. They wanted to put a gas station atop our biggest aquifer. I don't know the size of this one, but hearing that there is one, I'd like to know the impact on that aquifer. And basically, secondly, and one of the things that came early in this meeting was the intervener. I don't know whether you were advised by the attorney for the town that the intervener had no standing. But I think what I've heard in the last two meetings is that she has plenty of standing. And I don't know whether it was your decision or whether the town attorney's decision to take an intervener that has a solid background in what you are listening to and is acting as a fourth party for free. And I am going to ask that you and the town attorney give it a little more consideration in the time that is passing between this meeting and the next meeting. But I would like to take, and I would like to have the intervener get the proper standing because she is representing the people in this room.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else that would like to speak? No, come on up.
Hi, I'm Nevin Christensen, 44 West Mountain Road, literally a lifetime resident, born on Flaming Farm in 1951. Yippee. I'm very proud. I'm proud of our town and all you folks that are active here tonight and trying to preserve something that we would like to keep around. I think we all need to, seeing all you guys here, we need to get active and go to the state because, in my opinion, a large part of this problem is a law made by the state that says you, town, have to do this, what we say. And I'm seeing instead of, I like government by the people going up, making decisions and some control, perhaps, but not top-down government saying, you must do this, and opening the door for things that we really don't want. Nothing to do with our town specifically, but I think it's something we need to talk about, look at, think about, and maybe I'll get a bus and we'll go to the state's house sometime. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak during this public hearing? Seeing none, I believe the commission has a lot to discuss. I'll welcome the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, thank you for your hard work. This isn't easy, I know it. The applicant is pleased to stand on the record and all the materials that are submitted, and we're very appreciative of your attention to this and don't have any rebuttal comment at this time.
Thank you. So our next order of business is we have to discuss if we are closing the public hearing or asking for an extension. Does anyone feel there's outstanding information we need? Reminder, once we close the public hearing, we can't receive any further information.
So as part of the discussion for the public hearing today and the last of the public hearing, but we've started to hear a few specific technical questions. The hydrology one was a specific one. And so I was going to ask the third party to comment on some of that at some point. But I still feel that there are some specific technical questions that need to be resolved, and there's some discussion on our end. And the problem is when you close the public hearing, you can't have that.
I happen to agree. The open-endedness on comments 11 and 12 from the third party, providing design details at a later date, I think in order to feel comfortable, I would need a little bit more information on those design details, if the applicant would be willing. Anyone else have thoughts?
I think that if you would like our engineer to respond to the questions that you have, we'd be happy to do it. There's never been a more complete record. There's never been a larger record, and everything's been in. But and you guys still have access to your staff for any technical information you want and for any review of your information, and you're free to access your staff. Paul Battagliano.
Charles, I'll let you lead.
So I was interested in the details of the hydrology discussion. You've heard a couple different pieces of it. It was specific in there's a couple questions back to the details of the test pit, and that this is just a technical detail. I had some other follow-on comments, but I'd like to just understand from your perspective how those would be addressed.
Sure. I'd like to answer 3 comments that were made by Commissioner Levy as well, adding that one. So I'll answer comment 11 and 12, and then I'd like to answer the test pit comment and then hand over to Megan to talk about the hydrology, if that's okay. Regarding comment 11 and 12, those are specific to details of water quality units on underground infiltration systems, things like inspection ports, things like manhole placement. The reason we deferred that to a later time, which is very typical, is because certain manufacturers and different products, which we would only use a product approved by the state, have different different details and different specifics to them. If we selected one now, we'd be tying our hands to use that product, and it doesn't make it, doesn't let us be cost competitive in the future. It doesn't let us try other products, but we're happy to pick a product that's approved by the state and run it by the town engineer. And that's typically how it's done. So that would be to comment 11 and 12, as opposed to showing 5 inspection ports now when it might be 7 in the future, or it might be 10 if you use a different product. We'd like to not get that granular at the moment. So that was to comment 11 and 12.
Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Sir, when would be the appropriate time to show those?
Really, that's construction level detail. So I know that with the previous project for the north, we were obligated to submit construction plans for review. So that could be
at the time of site plan or at the time of building permit?
It was after site plan, what we did last time. Once again, if you want it at site plan, so be it. We'll do that. But it does really tie our hands as to which products we would use.
Thank you.
Yep. Regarding the geotechnical testing, as professionals will tell you, your infiltration rates and groundwater levels are not measured by going out and just looking for water. The water fluctuates. Water goes from top down and bottom up. You're looking for modeling, which is staining in the soil. It's the minerals that are deposited as the water leaves its mark, and that's how you determine the high water ground or ground level. So, and also at the depths that we dug, you're below the frost level, so you're not dealing in frozen soils. These are all completely standard practices. And also to do it at that time, if anything, it'd be more conservative because we're doing infiltration rates when it's colder out. The soils on these sites, both north and south, are very quickly draining. They're very good draining material. The extra test bits, the reason that extra test bits were dug as a result of the final comment is because those systems were not initially selected by us to be in those locations. As the project evolved, we proposed new systems in those locations, which were pointed out that our testing was a little far away from that. They wanted more testing. We did that. The groundwater did show that was a little high. So as a result, we relocated those systems. It had nothing to do with the time of year that the tests were conducted.
Thank you. Does anyone else on the commission have questions for either the third party or the applicants?
We were going to answer the comment about the hydrology.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I apologize.
No, it's fine. Is that okay?
Excuse me. Hello. For the record, my name is Megan Raymond. I am a registered soil scientist, a professional wetland scientist, and a certified floodplain manager. And as we all discussed at the first hearing, we went through the wetland systems on the property. And what we tried to do with our response to question 24 pertaining to the hydrology of the wetlands, the maintenance of the hydrology of the wetlands, really was provide more contextual detail about the physical characteristics that make up the conditions that we see in the field today. As you know, there are 7 wetlands on the site. We have Wetland 1, the largest wetland corridor that is comprised of Minister Brook and the Farmington River. These are large watershed systems. The 214 square miles to the watershed on Farmington River on our property line, 1.74 square miles of watershed to the Minister Brook drainage area as it confluences with the Farmington and the northeastern portion of the site. These watersheds are so large that the small perturbations that could occur with stormwater influence you would not see them. They're insignificant. But what we did critically evaluate was the smaller wetland complex, which comprised of a series of isolated wetlands that are in a cluster, wetland 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I don't have my pointer, do I? No, I do not. But it is, I can come up to the screen, but it's essentially, if you look to and I won't drop it this time. Thank you. Thanks, Brittany. Got it. Just the green? Yep. Great. So there are a series of wetland clusters in this location of the site. And these wetlands are relative. There's few of them are quite small, 0.03 acres. 0.05 acres, yeah, a few thousand square feet. And then the largest is there's two of them that are 0.95 acres, wetland 4 and wetland 6. And then in addition, we have wetland 2, which is located right here, another small isolated wetland. I think part of the impetus for the question was that in our wetland report, we needed to describe more specifically the nature of the hydrology that supports the existing conditions, which is that these wetlands are groundwater fed. This cluster here is a groundwater fed system that was evidenced, it's present on the National Wetland Inventory map. It was flagged early before the Hartford was built. It was flagged back in the original part of the site. This is not a stormwater wetland. So they are groundwater fed systems, but they're influenced by stormwater because you can see here on this site, we have 30 acres of parking lot that's connected impervious that just flows to these wetlands, either with sheet flow, which can exist, but then attenuate at the pervious edge around the pavement. But the more critical part is where stormwater is coming out of a pipe. And so basically, in our response in question 24, we provided more detail as to the nature of the hydrology, saying that the wetlands 2, 4, 5, and 7, these watersheds are maintained. There's no modification to the drainage areas to these systems. But what we did do on wetland 6, which is the western wetland, that area has that wetland has 2 stormwater pipes, DP5 and DP7, that drain right into the wetlands. About 6 acres of parking that drain into the wetland. And we see impairment of that wetland with deep scour, with flashy hydrology. We see evidence of the stormwater influence in that wetland. So we're trying to manage that and improve that by modifying the stormwater shed to that wetland, by reducing it, reducing that area, and increasing the amount of pervious conditions. So though we are reducing the stormwater shed to wetland 6, we're actually almost matching the pervious area within that watershed to maintain the infiltration into the ground and the base flow recharge to the wetland. I do have to say the types of studies that were described earlier tonight, these studies are not studies that exist for this type of work. What we do as wetland scientists is we're looking at conditions. We're working with our engineers to look at watersheds, but we're not measuring the groundwater recharge. A lot of these indicators, that's not something that it's a common tool. I think you guys have been sitting on this board. You're not used to seeing these types of data that are presented to you. But what we do use is science-based targets, and that pertain to the area around a wetland. What is the most important area around the wetland? It's the 100 feet around that wetland. That's been documented in a number of literature citations, most notably that's noted in the response, Castile and al. So what we did to maintain the hydrology of wetland 6 and actually improve this overall condition to this whole complex was to rewild the 2 acres of parking lot that currently surround this complex and allow for natural infiltration and recharge in the closest area adjacent to the wetland boundary. So we are rewilding the area within 100 feet, over 95, almost 94% of it. And that is, so when you look at the modifications to the stormwater design by reducing the direct pipe flow discharge from connected impervious with water quality units, ensuring that we're having clean drainage, and then as well allowing for infiltration around the wetland boundary. Those are the tools, and those are documented tools, science-based, that will maintain the hydrology of that wetland system and actually set it up for long-term success. Because what we're going to see if it's untreated as it exists today, unaffected, you're going to see continual scour of that system, the transition of vernal pools that exist in that area from ephemeral areas to now scoured out standing water wetlands that foster the habitat for more facultative species like green frogs and bullfrogs. And so we would see a manipulation. We're already seeing an affected condition. And this is a developed site. We're working in a developed site. So what we're looking at to address that is looking at the indications of that indications of that development, the impairments that exist, and improving those conditions. And these are science-based approaches.
you've used the term science a couple of times. Is it science or empirical based on past studies?
It's based on, well, I guess there's a couple of things. There's science as it relates to the evaluation of existing conditions, the characterization of the habitats and so forth. But as it relates to, let's just say, the importance of the 100-foot buffer surrounding a wetland, that's documented in peer-reviewed literature, such as Castile and all, as well as many other documents. You could look at our DEP buffer guidance. You could look at the riparian guidance.
Yeah, so I'll be a little more specific in this. When I think of thing as like a science, I think of something that has a full model that handles all the different known first, second order effects and can describe when they matter, when they don't. But you can also have, without a model, very detailed historical analyses that are subject to peer review. These are standard practices, but they are empirical because the understanding isn't the underlying model doesn't exist, but you can still see it. So I'm asking, you're using the term science here, and I'm coming at it from an engineering perspective. I'm trying to understand, is it science or is it empirical understanding? Because one of the questions that we sort of keep coming back to is that a lot of the regulations around the wetlands sort of seems to take things for all properties as the same. You just mentioned that that has a huge drainage area, like for one of the wetlands. It's like, I don't know how many square miles you said.
Yeah,
but
214, for example, for the Farmington.
But you can imagine that the impact on the river for that same area, there's a lot more of an impact when it's really close to the river than when it's way over on the edge of that piece. Now, some of that's just empirical again, and we've tried to create empirical results so it's standard. But that's why I was asking about the difference between the model, the science model, and the empiricism.
Yeah, I mean, these aren't the model. It's not modeled in a computer. It's actually like natural science. It's field evaluation. It's observation. It's the basis of natural science. Yes.
Okay, so you're basically saying it's empirical based on a lot of
it's observational.
Observations.
Yes.
Okay. No, that's a fine distinction.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I fully understood what you meant by that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Great. I don't know how to put this. Oh, I think I do. I will yield back to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the other commissioners have questions?
This might be a question for you guys. Do we have any photos or documents showing where the aquifers are in comparison to this build site?
So yeah, there is an adopted aquifer map that we have access to. This project is not within an aquifer area. If it was, it would be reviewed by our zoning commission, which is also our aquifer protection agency.
Okay.
Sorry, question. So, but we heard some testimony that the aquifer is close. So what's the definition of where something's in the aquifer or not?
So we have polygons, kind of like the NDB database that shows the areas of the aquifer, and this parcel is not included in that. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how close the next closest one is. I'd have to look at that.
Oh, okay. So, sounds reasonable. Sounds like a piece of information.
It's a polygon that identifies the aquifer protection area, not simply the aquifers. That's what the polygon.
Right, which makes sense. It's an aquifer area, right? But the question, I mean, one of the things we've been hearing a lot sort of tonight is that, it's a large, everyone knows it's sort of a large project, but the question of sort of how good is all of our standard mitigation, procedures for these kinds of things, which have been written down by DEEP and everybody else, how applicable are they to this situation when, and we've heard this in the past, it's different when this was one development and along the river, most of it wasn't developed. And now this is becoming the last development. And I went back to the question about, is it a model or is it empirical? Because a lot of our previous evidence on these things is based on observations on single sort of areas. And so I was very interested in, I've just said all that as a statement. I would be interested in hearing what the third party thinks about that line of logic, or am I completely off? So
You're certainly well within, ask them to see if they can.
So,
Up to the chairman, of course.
yeah. Am I understanding this even closely right, or am I off on this interpretation?
No, I think you're right. And I think the applicant's response, although I will acknowledge this is a very tough room and the easy response would be to say, no, it's terrible, do this. But I do agree with Megan's response in that this is not quantitative data like a lot of engineering and the stormwater calculations, and you can go through the numbers and it's like this and it's like that. A lot of ecological science is qualitative. It's a function of scale. It's a function of, food webs and species webs and all these different interactions that you can't always measure. So we use a lot of the tools that we have available to us based on field observation, based on case studies, based on the analysis of the species that are there, the vegetation, the changes over time, historical aerial photographs, elevation. And what I think is very telling about these wetlands is that they were there before the Hartford was there, and they were mapped as such, right? So they were there not because of the Hartford and not because of that impervious surface dumping stormwater to them, which is not common, and it was not expected, which is why I had written the comment the way that I did. So the fact that she was able to explain that and say they existed before, they exist now, but what is not clear and has not been clear so far is that these are degraded systems. They're not beautiful, pristine wetlands with a bunch of obligate vernal pool species thriving. They're pretty shallow. They're infilling. Their functions, though present and values, are there, but these are kind of struggling systems. So it's kind of exciting to hear that they will be getting some fresh water inputs, some clean inputs, as opposed to what they've been getting. And I think many members of the public, haven't had the benefit to see this system. And it's very difficult to hear, a wetland, but a wetland is not always a wetland. And that's why also I would encourage people to review the very thorough functions and values analysis that the applicant had provided. And they're very detailed reports, on the NDDB species, on the herpetology, on all of these systems. I mean, pages and pages of data, and it's very hard to consolidate into these concise documents. So keep in mind that was already there. So I guess, yes, to answer your question, I think that the applicant has answered it, that this is a more qualitative approach. It is, I guess, based on empirical data, if that's the right term. It's part of wetland science.
Well, and I think that's a fine characterization. I'm trying to close on the differences in perception. There's obviously been a ton of work that's trying to address. Part of our job is to make sure that all the guidelines on these things are being followed. And we're trying to make sure we kind of run down each of the main tasks. One of the other pieces that I've been a little concerned about is that it's always been this, like, what's the backup plan? How do you do the monitoring? And since the monitoring is we're talking with the people developing this, but then it's going to transfer to some other ownership. And how do those relations, how does all the monitoring transfer at that? And I was wondering, are there best practices for that?
Unfortunately, no. But what there are conditions and conditions of approval that are at the commission's disposal, right? You can have recommendations, as we talked about before. Do I think their 2 years of monitoring is adequate? I think it's adequate. Is it fantastic? No. But that's for the commission's discretion. And there's also the ability to have certain conditions of approval carry with the land records and carry with the property. Now, do you want someone to monitor for invasive species for 100 years in perpetuity? I don't think so. I don't think that makes sense. And I think that's overly burdensome, right? But what are the goals of this, right? So one of the goals would be to have these wetlands protected, to have that native vegetation that they're planting be sustainable, right? So once it can get to a steady state and to a stable community where those invasive threats are less, then I think that's great. One condition you may want to include, there's going to be landscaping on the property, and maybe those landscapers can go through and at least once a year after a period of X number of years of monitoring, go through and clear out the invasives from these sensitive areas, right? Because invasives are always going to come in.
Yeah, I was using invasives as an example,
Yeah.
but I'm more interested, long-term in the water quality and the impact on the Farmington.
Yeah. So I think that's where it gets back to some of Chuck's comments on having those details for the stormwater management system, the inspection ports. How do you know that your stormwater system is just as functional as the day it was installed if we're 20, 30, 40 years down the road? What are the guidelines for that? I mean, maybe Chuck could speak to that, but that's what you want to ensure is that the system continues to function as it was designed. Because as designed, as one of the members of the public said, everything looks great on paper. But when it really goes in and when this really happens, is that really what you're going to be left with? So I think you need to be sure to implement safeguards in a just and legal manner through your conditions that these are the things that we are expecting and that should, be happening and maintained.
Okay, thank you. I see Chuck is right.
So to answer your question regarding the maintenance, that is something that all towns and all commissions struggle with. One thing that I am seeing is that in the town's MS4 plan, one of the typical requirements is that any public or private properties that have stormwater management systems, they would be required to provide to town staff a maintenance report or an inspection report. That's something that maybe George or Brittany could coordinate with the town engineer to see if that is part of the town plan going forward. The MS4 plan is a staged process, so that may not have been implemented yet. It may not be part of the town's plan, but that is something that I have seen other towns adopt. And of course, it's a staffing issue. You would then have to have someone from the staff compile these, review them, ensure that that's happening. But the old state's unfunded mandate. So
Sure, but as I think one of the questions is because of the legal process by which this is coming towards us, and we're looking at specifically, we have wetlands and conservation, but this approval process is only on the wetlands part. It's very specific guidelines. Typically, those things would be dealt with in other parts of the approval process of the town, but many of those are being bypassed. Will that would that go through the town now as part of that system?
So that would not necessarily be part of the 830G aspect of it. This would still be considered a private property in town that has a stormwater management system that needs to be maintained. If this type of language is within the town's MS4 plan or will be implemented in the future in the town's MS4 plan, then yes, this property would need to comply with that. One thing I have seen other towns do is again, this is a very, very difficult issue for commissions to deal with because it's private property. The town really can't, unless there's a danger to the community or something like that. You can't go on there and maintain or do something like that to the private property. One thing you could do, I have seen other towns do, is on the property deed, have a notice essentially put on the deed that says, this property has a permitted stormwater management plan that requires maintenance, such that if a future purchaser of the property buys the property, when they do the deed research, that will be there on the books, so to speak, saying like, hey, you're buying this property, you have to maintain this stormwater system. Again, that doesn't guarantee that they're going to do that. It does put them on notice that is there in this day and age. How someone could buy a property like this and not realize that they have to maintain a stormwater system, I don't know, but that's something I've seen other towns do.
I think those are conditions that are applicable to the inland wetlands decision-making process and can be crafted as part of a decision-making process.
Have we done that before?
Yes, we certainly have included monitoring requirements, absolutely. So this would be, it's going to be more technical, but sure.
Well, I think the distinction, George, in my mind, is in the past we've often done this when it was one owner, and where it's very clear that within a couple of years the ownership's going to change, and then the responsibility for all the mitigations that we've talked about, which is really addressing a lot of the concerns that are in the hall in the room, that's an added complexity. And I was just asking if we have experience with that, that's great. If we don't, doesn't mean we can't do it.
Experience with the commission requiring, a deed-related recordation. Not that I can recall, but that doesn't mean you can't do it.
No, I'm just trying to figure out where we are in our practical implementation of this.
This is also the biggest item we've come across.
We keep saying that every one of these things that comes across, that this is the biggest one, and then there's a bigger one, which, it is again why I was talking a little bit about empirical versus science. A lot of our empirical work is on smaller scale work, et cetera. And I was wondering, has there been a lot of sort of research over the time as projects in this kind of environment have gotten to ever higher densities and size, and how well, none of this stuff is perfect. Everything's has a probability distribution. So, how well does it fit to that past experience? Has there been research in that area? These water management techniques, and clearly the Hartford had one set of uses, and people have rightly pointed out when everyone's living there, there's another set of uses, a lot more individuals going on.
Sure. So I'm not sure how to answer that. So the uses, I think when it was the Hartford, it was a much more controlled use, right? People are not going to be washing their cars in the parking lot and, doing things that someone would do if they necessarily lived there, let's say. But I don't think, again, this would be my opinion. I mean, typically when I do reviews, everything is based on rules and regulations. Does it meet the rules and regulations? And in a very engineering-esque, non-imperial sort of thing, if I'm saying that correctly. I don't. The impervious area and the things that are going to impact the stormwater, I really don't see changing. Once the infrastructure is set up and the stormwater management systems are maintained and inspected, I don't really see that being an issue.
Sure. Okay. I agree with you, but I want to go back to the sort of the question I asked before, which is, we have a set of rules and guidelines and regulations that we're all trying to follow. And the basic Wetlands Commission is to make sure that those are being followed, and there's no better alternatives given the constraints. But the question I was sort of asking is, a lot of that stuff is based on development history over time, smaller areas, in different, close to rivers, not so close, wetlands. But now you've seen these sort of larger projects get developed. Has there been any research that has shown how well those past guidelines apply to something like this?
Yes. Okay. So I think I understand what you're asking. So stormwater management is moving forward at a very rapid pace. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I have seen development from before there were stormwater guidelines, state stormwater guidelines, to now where all of New England has state stormwater manuals. They're promulgated even above by EPA and everything. Development, or the stormwater management of development, has really gotten away from collecting all the water, putting it in one place, treating it, and then letting it go. So your current stormwater management standards is really much more about low impact development, and that's basically you're collecting and treating the water at the source and releasing it at the source. So a big push for infiltration and retention. You're not collecting the water from, say, the northern 20 acres, moving it to the southern 20 acres, and then infiltrating it. You're putting it in the ground, as close to where it falls as you can. And at the risk of being run over in the parking lot, the engineers have done a good job at doing that here. You notice that there's multiple infiltration systems throughout the project, so that water is not being transported to one corner of the development and then treated and infiltrated there. It's much more spread out, and so that's something that stormwater management standards have gotten much better at implementing. So it's no longer you collect everything, you push it to one corner.
And because of that, the size, since you're going to sort of dispersive control over things, then the fact that one of these systems gets to be a much larger load, you're not concentrating it. So it makes it so that you're dispersing the water generally across it. That's why you think it scales well as you increase the size.
Yes, and the current stormwater standards, as far as the loading and this sort of thing, that's all part of the calculations. That's all part of the numbers, and that's a fairly straightforward thing to calculate, as opposed to trying to calculate, say, the groundwater flow to a very specific small wetland. So as far as the loading for the stormwater management systems, that's fairly straightforward.
Thank you. You've helped a lot. Thank you.
Sure. Do you guys all set with me for the moment? Okay.
I was going to ask if anyone.
A question for the applicant. I know a couple sessions ago, we talked about looking at the stormwater and pollution around the north side. That was completed a couple of years ago. What the effects on the Farmington and wetlands have been for that, and to give us a little bit of a gauge of what we could expect here. So I haven't heard anything since I asked that question, so wanted to ask it again.
I'm not sure if you're asking regarding whether there's monitoring going on, or just what the
monitoring, and what have the results been?
Yeah, I think going back to what I said earlier, there hasn't been continued monitoring because there wasn't any obligation to, I guess. Okay. To the point earlier that was being discussed, you can make that conditional. You can put it on a deed to be transferable. You can condition us to report back to the town engineer. So just saying that those are options for this application. As far as the north, I could just tell you that the same types of measures were in place. The soils in there infiltrated water so quickly during our testing, we couldn't even keep water in the holes. So we have several infiltration systems throughout the site that you don't see. They're underground, and then the larger pond in the back. And they were meant to disperse water very quickly into ground. But to directly answer your question, it hasn't been monitored, but we haven't seen any ill effects such as erosion or high flows coming out or anything that would give us concern.
I guess my question, would be to Brittany and George is there any way we could ask for a study to be done on any PFAs and things of that nature that are, being pushed into the wetlands or Farmington from that lot?
So you're asking if we can request information from the north site?
Correct. So that could give us a baseline to what we could expect in the future state.
I don't know if legally we can require that. I mean, that information is a good to know information to have. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we can legally require that information to contribute to the decision of this application.
Can I make one additional comment to maybe kind of give you a little bit more peace of mind? From the north, there's actually only one discharge out of that, even though there's treatment and collection throughout the site, there's only one discharge point. It's the pond in the back that's in this corner here. And there's been no evidence of any discharge that's created sediment plumes or erosion or anything of that nature. That pond has been infiltrating the way it's supposed to. So I think, like, as far as I'm trying to think of, like, the types of things that would be done to maybe answer your question, if they were easy, I'd say right away, let's go do it. But the most obvious is the observation that if it's not functioning as planned, or if it is migrating sediment or additional runoff to the Farmington, you would see that in the form of erosion or sediment plumes, and we haven't witnessed any of that.
So on the same lines, were there any lessons learned from the north in terms of when you were doing the construction or the implementation afterwards that were integrated into the south as part of that?
Yeah, and actually, I appreciate you asking that, because there were several lessons learned, and the biggest one, to Mr. Ian's point of separating your collection points. In the north, like I said, there's several infiltration systems throughout, but the back pond is doing a majority of the work. In this development, we have several. When we first started discussing how to approach stormwater, and we asked ourselves that question: should we have one central collection point, or should we disperse it? And as we designed it and looked at new regulations that have come into effect, dispersion was the way to do that. So this has several smaller systems, which also kind of goes to your question about, does having a larger system create potentially more issues? So the south, we've designed it with several smaller systems, and the regulations have also changed such that you have to reduce stormwater on your smaller storms, your 2-year storms. So that's why when I first started my presentation, I was able to say that we reduced the 2-year storm by X amount. I don't want to misquote what's in my documents, but by X amount. And also the water quality, that we went above and beyond because of the way the design lent itself. As we disperse these systems, we inherently infiltrated more water, which is even what's leading to the question about the hydrology to the wetlands. So that would be the number one lesson learned about having multiple smaller systems throughout the site. And then as far as how those systems, some nuances in how they're designed to infiltrate more water is obviously a result of the new requirements.
Do we have any further questions? Seeing none, we do need to potentially close the public hearing. Is there any discussion on if we feel like there's any outstanding information that would warrant asking for an extension?
I've heard a lot of different perspectives today. Like, I've heard some actually from, the majority of the public comments are relative to conservation and other issues, but there have been some, technical ones that we started to talk about. And I appreciate the discussions from both groups. And these are very technical pieces, but that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of. I always hate it when we get to the end of these lots of the public hearings. We're trying to get to sort of what the kind of the main technical issues are, and then we close the public hearing and we can't have more comments from the experts to resolve these things. And I don't know if there's any other option behind this, but we get ourselves into this box a lot.
We do. We are up against the deadline, and extending this would be at the applicant's discretion. We can make the ask. But I think we'd have to articulate a reason.
Right, I would just make sure if you are asking to keep it open, you have specific items that you want addressed.
Can we take like a 5-minute recess to to think about this for a little bit. I feel like I'm the holdup on this, and I want to organize my thoughts. I mean, luckily it's not 11:30; it's only 8:30. I feel like I have all the right people here to kind of address it and to address some of the notes from the public, but I can't in 5 minutes, or I can't in like 2 seconds organize that thought.
We can, do we need a motion to recess? Okay, yeah, if you want to make a motion.
I would like the motion to take a recess for about 5 minutes so we can try to get this organized and try to drive this home in this meeting. Again.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll be at recess for, we'll say come back 8:25. And back in order. Does anyone have any further comments, thoughts, questions?
I'm trying to think of who. I guess I'm going to address it to both the applicant and the third party review. And I'm going to state what's bothering me, and then I want you can just address it on either side. I'm trying to consolidate this. I think there's 4 points, but I'm not sure about the count. One was the issue about, what is the mitigation with when things sort of don't go as planned, and a lot of that has to do with the ownership. And we talked an awful lot about ways of managing, the invasives or the salt, pesticide, the integrated management system. How does that change, and how do we monitor that? And I think what I've heard is that, while it hasn't been done necessarily in the north, that if we do some innovative ways of thinking about that some of those concerns could be mitigated. And what I think I've heard is that the way to do that is through something that transfers in ownership. We haven't had a chance to talk about what that might look like, but I think that that's the path forward, and I want to hear both groups talking about that. The second piece that I've been wondering about a lot is that we've had a lot of focus on the wetlands sort of recharge and health, and again, the sort of the treatments of the areas around the complex here, but we haven't directly talked about the impact on the Farmington. The idea being that because we do everything else really well, there's no impact on the Farmington. And one of the issues that we raised a couple of meetings ago was the fact that when each of these developments is by itself, then there's areas around where things can sort of adjust. Wildlife can adjust going down, wildlife interpacts with the Farmington. That's all part of the river sort of health. And the question is, as things get ever more developed, is there, a second effect that we aren't really accounting for? So I'd like to hear from both of you as to why that is or isn't, or what we might do about it. And I think the third thing that's sort of bugging me is this discussion about sort of, what's the role of absolute qualitative measurements versus the quantitative in the past history of things. And I think that that's been addressed. But I'm wondering how both the intervener and the third party expert would articulate that to the people in the room who've been asking that. Because I don't think that I can, from what I've heard, do that as well as I hope that you two can do. And that's a very weak interpretation of what I've been thinking about for 5 minutes, but I haven't had a chance to ask anybody this, so I'm doing this for the first time. So do you think you guys could help me straighten this out? Okay.
Could I have 1 second?
Sure.
All right. Sorry, I was waiting for your fourth point. That's why I hesitated coming up here. I believe I got three of them. I'm going to let TJ speak to the first one, but with TJ, I don't know if you want to do that now, but
it would help you to know the profile of the owner, the Silverman Group. They own apartments up and down the East Coast. They're long-term hold investors. Their properties, you can see how they're maintained and taken care of. And it's unlikely that there'll be some of these buildings or apartments that you've had approved get sold or spun out within 18 months of completion as soon as they're leased up. And that's not the case with this owner that you have. It's not to say that they couldn't sell it, but they're long-term hold investors and they're not private equity. They're a family. Number two, with respect to the conditions of maintenance going forward, very typically and very commonly, those are in the form of covenants that run with the land and they're conditions of the deed. Sometimes they're in easements, depending if if it helps to have a defined area, et cetera. But it's very common for your land use people to do that. Town council, we've worked with town council in Simsbury with easements and covenants on projects for decades. So that's something that is doable and can be done.
Thank you, TJ. Yeah, and that's not uncommon for us to do and monitor these sites. As far as your question as far as the impact to the Farmington, I'm going to go back to one of the first statements that I made when we started the presentation the first time, is we're maintaining the existing outlets that are going out there that currently exist, right? So your impact to the Farmington is by how much water is going out there, volume and flow, and then sediment or any kind of erosion that's migrating from the site, correct? If we're maintaining those same outlets, we're not introducing something new from a discharge point, something that would cause a different migration pattern or something like that. And by reducing the impervious on the site and the water quality improvements that we're regulated to do by the state, we're reducing that water going out there. So since I came up last time I checked, our 2-year storm is being reduced by 70%. That's 5 years ago. No one would walk into a room and say that, especially for a project of this size. Our 100-year storm is reduced by 30%. So if you're maintaining the same outlets and you're reducing the amount of flow going to that, plus you're reducing the volume because of all the infiltration we're doing, you've addressed those first 2 points that I mentioned. The water quality is also being addressed by the infiltration and the water quality units and the sumps and the BMPs that we have throughout the site. So it's only an improvement as far as the water that's going out to the Farmington. If we were adding flow, if we were introducing a new pipe, I would still be able to probably mitigate that and sit here and defend that to you. But the fact that we're not introducing that really makes it kind of an easy answer for me to say that. Is that?
Yeah. So I'll concede that for that part of the water management, that's a true, I understand what you're saying. But for a healthy Farmington River, which is still under our jurisdiction as the Wetlands Commission, there's interaction on the wildlife and the things living in there. So if right now I give you that the water management part of it's right, we had some concerns about the fact that things are sort of being developed all up and down. So it has wildlife interactions that impact the Farmington. What would, from your perspective, what experience have you had with that? Can that be mitigated or observed or minimized? Like, I don't understand all the interaction between the wildlife and the fish and obviously the fish habitats and what's going on, but I expect it's a pretty strong one. Most of these ecosystems are tied tightly together.
Yes. And if you want to speak specifically to stormwater, and then I'll migrate away from stormwater for a second. From the stormwater, that is basically comes down to water quality. So it comes down to things like temperature and sediment leaving your site. And I think the things I mentioned before, the infiltration and the treatment takes care of that. I don't want to speak for Megan or get too in detail about the wildlife stuff. The only thing I'll let her do that if you're not satisfied with what I'm going to say. But one thing I do want to point out, there's been a lot of things said, but for us to get to the point that we were able to develop these plans and these applications, there was about a year of correspondence with the DEP regarding the NDDBs and all the studies that we did. We've been on this site really going back to when it was first demolished and have continued to do that. So as part of this application, our first correspondence was with the DEP, and the consensus or the conclusion of all that was the things I've been kind of harping on, that we've limited ourselves to the existing disturbed area. That wasn't necessarily something that we said that will solve all your problems. It was a result of all the studies and the interaction with the DEP that led us to that point. And all of that was, or part of that was, to protect the buffers to the Farmington. That was like the first thing the DP said to us. And we revised our plans or changed our approach because of that. So by the time we came to you, you didn't, maybe understand that process, but all of that had the wildlife and the Farmington in mind. And it was started with our interaction with the DEP, which at this point was probably started over a year ago. Or restarted, I should say, over a year ago. We started with them 7-8 years ago. So it was a series of very small steps that led us to the large conclusion of staying within that footprint. And that was where the DP was satisfied based on the results of our studies, the wildlife we saw there, the botany we studied, that we were doing the right thing. So that's when we didn't want to come to this commission until we knew that they were satisfied and we had something we could present to you that would represent that.
So is it a fair assumption then, because you did that work with Deep, and they knew that you were putting the site in among areas that have been redeveloped and more intensely than probably originally imagined for the Farmington, that Deep in its current state didn't have an issue with this whole area along the Farmington being more developed in terms of the impact on the Farmington? Is that is that a reasonable statement to make, or is that unknown?
I don't think they would have issued our approval if they felt otherwise. So the letters that they gave us were basically, the first letter said, we have concerns. You need to do all these studies. Mm-hmm. So then we did that for several months and came back to them, and they review it. However, so I don't want to speak to them saying that they reviewed it for 100 miles or 50 miles or whatever. But obviously they did what they needed to do after 6 months of our interaction and came back satisfied that if we did what we did, we would protect what they were looking to protect.
Okay, can I hold you for 1 second?
Of course.
So George, if I was asking that same question to the town engineer, which was, given that this development there's a lot more development along the Farmington, would he have any concerns that, in terms of the impact on the Farmington, that the fact that there's so much more development along that there's nothing that the town engineers would think would be, the fact that there's so much development along it would not impact their concerns about the local development in this one situation? Because we heard that Deep probably doesn't have that concern because they issued the permit. The question is, would we have done it?
So the town engineer is going to look at the engineer design for this site.
Yep.
And whether it meets state and local requirements.
Okay.
Charles, are you talking more on like the cumulative effect versus just the individual effect?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that's been discussed in here, right? But that the town residents have brought up, right? That it's not the same as when the Hartford went in and it was just one small part. A lot more of it's been developed, and there was a lot of question about wildlife access, which is on the conservation side.
Yep.
But if it has an impact on the Farmington River quality, then it falls under wetlands. And so I was zeroing in on this, and your answer about what, your interaction with Deep has helped me understand that more. And I clarified a little bit more with that. And so we can either zero in on this particular topic, and I can ask the third part of you, or you can answer the third question. What would you like to do?
Why don't we conclude this part of it?
Okay.
Just before we move on, the NDD, the information you said with D, that's included in the application, right?
That's Megan. Which report is that in?
For the records, Megan Raymond, the NDDB final determination letter is included in the impact assessment report. And the studies and documentations that provided that outcome are presented in the biological assessment report.
Okay. So yeah, so if I could hear the third.
I believe
party
he wants to hear the third party review take on that.
Thanks, Paul. Sorry, Chuck. So, not to exactly repeat what George had said, but essentially we reviewed this, and this project does meet the state and local stormwater requirements. Those requirements have been developed to ensure that things like the Farmington River are any impacts to them would be minimized as much as possible.
But I'm going to rephrase that. So when we originally sort of started talking about this, we were sort of taking as a given that the stormwater runoff management has been optimized, and that because it's a distributed system, it's probably the lowest impact you could have for a size like this. The question I was sort of asking was, if you think about the direct impact to the Farmington River, not from the water runoff, but from wildlife interactions or anything else, and the answer I heard from the applicant was that because they've been talking to Deep, they've improved on this stuff, and because Deep has thought about this from these pieces, they feel that there is no other potential impact to the Farmington from wildlife interactions, et cetera, that the fact that things are more developed doesn't have an impact, and on the Farmington quality itself. And I was asking whether, from your perspective as an independent, does that make sense, or is there anything else that we should be thinking about?
So I can speak to the stormwater, sedimentation, erosion control, that sort of thing, that it meets the state standards. Therefore, it shouldn't, if things are maintained and built correctly, blah, blah, blah. Michelle, I'm going to defer to Michelle on the wildlife question now.
And that's fine. That's fine.
Saw that coming, Chuck. So from a wildlife standpoint, I mean, that's one facet to kind of latch onto of the whole ecosystem, right? And so we have to be mindful of context, and we have to be mindful of scale, right? We could zoom out 10,000 feet and be looking at the Farmington on that landscape scale, and we would see all these developments within that whole Farmington River watershed. And each of those is contributing, one piece, whether it's water, wildlife connectivity, sedimentation, erosion, all those wetland functions and values, right? But unfortunately, we're here just for this one parcel, and to look at that. So we have to look at the wetland functions and values as it pertains in this question to the Farmington River, and how is this project going to impact the functions and values of the Farmington River? And based on the reports that they've submitted, based on the site plans, their responses to comments, all the submitted documentation, it's my opinion that the impact to the functions and values of the Farmington River from this project will be negligible. If this were a pristine, undeveloped site that were forested, maybe we had some core forest, we would have a different suite of species there. I would probably have a different response. This is a previously developed site. It's littered with concrete and debris. It's not a forested community with a lot of ecological value as it sits today. So the other thing is that they're staying well beyond the upland review area to the Farmington River, and they're maintaining that buffer of forested floodplain community. I believe that was critical habitat as well, and some of those wetland communities and wetland complexes that are down there. So I feel comfortable saying that there's not going to be any impact down at the Farmington because of not only the stormwater management, which is typically your greatest threat. There's no forest clearing. There's no habitat alteration. There's really no change down there. But again, once you start to zoom out and look at a landscape scale, you're looking at more of the town. And I think if you're concerned about impacts to the Farmington River on that broader scale, it's looking more at your plan of conservation and development and what type of development you allow proximal to with inputs to the Farmington River. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely does.
Okay.
And so what I took away from that is that you agree with the methodology and the interpretation of the applicant in this, and that there isn't anything particular about this particular parcel in this time period that would make the concerns that some of the public's had about wildlife interactions and the health of the Farmington that would bring that to an issue that has to be resolved.
Correct. If the use were different, if it were some sort of commercial industrial, right, where you have hazardous waste generator or auto repair or a dry cleaner, somewhere where you have a greater risk of chemicals in large or small quantities, then I would be more concerned on the risk of, let's say there were a hurricane, what's going to happen? What's your protection measures for that? But these are residential developments, small scale, right? You're not going to have that same, well, no, I meant, sorry. I take that back. I'm sorry. It is not small scale. I meant the houses themselves. We're talking one car garage where there's not going to be the opportunity to store a lot of gasoline or fertilizers, pesticides. You don't have individual homeowners maintaining properties, right? Where that risk is the same as you would think about a commercial or industrial property. So the site use is also what's informing my opinion on the risk level.
Okay. And my recollection is that we're not, because of the way it's laid out, we're not susceptible to floods on the Farmington in this case. We're way outside of the flood zone.
So correct me if I'm wrong, the development in its entirety is beyond the 100-year floodplain.
Yep.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. But I do want to correct for the record, this is not a small scale development. So I apologize. My intention was to mean we're talking one car garage, single family type properties or units rather.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions or any other follow-up?
No, I think I'm okay on that one.
Okay. All right.
Could I attempt to address your last comment?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm going to try to simplify this, and hopefully Megan is okay with that. As far as the hydrology going to the wetlands. No, I'm going to simplify what you said. I totally agree with your answer prior. I'm just going to simplify. So as Megan said, we know that wetlands groundwater fed because it existed before the Hartford was developed.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening today is that the whatever acreage of parking lot is going directly into a pipe, going into that system, and you could see the erosion, you could see the scours, you could see the channels that were created. Mm-hmm. So we didn't say to ourselves, let's just match that. Let's just, continue that. We said, how do we improve that? And the improvement is by taking the 100 feet around that and making that pervious so that water could infiltrate through and have clean water feed that wetland. So as far as quantitative versus qualitative, that was kind of that qualitative approach. Just because a parking lot is drained into it today doesn't mean that's something we should continue. So our approach was to do that, was to have that buffer where we know now you have that 100 foot around it and that water's infiltrating through. And instead of just having a parking lot going directly in through a pipe. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I don't really know how to vocalize what's going on in my mind right now. I hear what you're saying about how everything in the parking lot is not really being managed right now. You're going to work to manage it better. But right now, there's no cars on that parking lot. There's no buildings there. And I'm struggling with trying to figure out how it's possible that so many people have been standing here at the podium. I'm going to expose my opinions a little bit here. And this is what am I trying to say? initially there was a plan that was denied that was 430 units, but it was a larger sprawl. And that was denied. I wasn't a part of that, so I don't know all of the details. And so now we're at a smaller footprint, but a larger scale, more high density project. And I'm struggling to figure out how everybody is confidently saying that it's a better plan and it's going to be less impactful on the immediate environment.
So my first comment to that was, and just since you weren't here, that plan never made it to this commission. So just for the record, that only got to master plan at planning and zoning. We did come before this commission informally. So in case some of you do remember that, we were here informally. So I'm not going to get into what's better or not better. So I really just want to focus on what we attempted to do for this. So we didn't even get to the point last time where we got to discuss stormwater and all the data that we've been saying now, the numbers we're sending out to you about reduction in storm. We didn't even get that far. So I really don't want to compare the two in that sense. I could only speak to what we're trying to do now. And the regulations have since changed. So if we had come in then with the design, it would have actually been slightly different than it is now. So for that matter alone, if you believe in infiltration and you believe in reduction of runoff and having multiple methods, this plan is better than it would have been if we came in 3 years ago.
Do we have any other discussion, comments? I'm not seeing anything that we can ask for an extension on the public hearing. If anyone has any other feelings on that, speak now. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on closing the public hearing. Anybody?
Well, without an extension from the applicant, you must close the public hearing. So I'd like to ask the applicant.
If anyone has anything articulatable that we can ask the applicant for an extension, I'm all ears. I'm not hearing or seeing any myself. So I'll ask again for a motion.
Well, so hold on 1 second. I want to ask Sue something.
Yep.
Given what you just heard, Sue, from your question, which goes to sort of an awful lot of this discussion we've been hearing from the public, do you feel you can articulate that answer back to the public at this point in time? Based on the answers you heard? And I can help you a little bit. Like what I heard was a reason why this is better, but it goes to, you can be better than a previous solution, but that's not the same thing as saying that you've looked at all the alternatives. That's the best solution. And I don't know if that's what you're driving at, but that's one of the things that I keep going back to, given the constraints of the 30G, whatever it is, 830G, whatever this for the process is. And I was just wondering if you had zeroed in on this in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, everywhere I've been, everything I've studied, all the jobs I've had, every field I've walked through, and every river I've stocked with fish, none of that is helping me rationalize this right now. And I don't know what I'm looking for, but I haven't found it yet. If that makes, I
think that's a good comment on sort of where we are in this process. We've heard an awful lot of different material. Unfortunately, we understand a lot more of the pieces.
Right.
The public has very strong feelings about this thing, but they don't have access to all the details. We haven't been able to have a long discussion with each of them. It's the requirement is that we can achieve that in our minds, that we've done that. We've been listening to each of these pieces, but that's sort of one of the holdups I have, and I was trying to work through pieces of that with my discussion, but we've had that for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably longer if it's one of my things, but it's and I think that's one of the holdups I'm at. I was just wondering where you were.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a large similar holdup with me. I feel like there's not clarity where there should be, and I can't really put my finger on it. I hear what the third-party reviewer is saying, and I respect that, and I understand, and I get it. And I hear what the applicant is saying, and I understand, and I get it. But I don't know. I'm at an I don't know. That doesn't help you. I'm sorry.
Joe, you're quiet. What are you thinking?
I got. There's a ton of information here. Most of it I've read through. I'm not sure what other information we can get. There's just a ton of stuff here, and I think we just have to deal with what's ahead of in front of us, and make the decision. I'm not aware. There's pages and pages here of information. We've had a third party look at it once. We had to look at it again. The applicant responded. There were other review. They responded again. I don't know how much more information we can get. I'm sure some people want to show up and offer an opinion, and that's great. That's why you have a town government like this. But as far as any actionable information, I'm not really sure how much more there is to get.
Okay, I understand that perspective. For me, it's mostly not about the actual information that's buried in the 2,000 pages of stuff here. It's about the context of that. And so for me, the reason for why I always want to have these discussions, I've gotten an awful lot out of just the last little bit of the discussion with both groups as to how you're not gonna get to consensus, but you're gonna get to understanding of what these impacts are.
Right.
And the problem I have with the process is that when we close the public hearing, we're done getting the context. And whereas if the public hearing was open and we could talk again to the applicant and the third party reviewer, we'd get to more of the context.
Yeah.
And
we have to close the hearing.
Right.
Unless the applicants, I'm just kind of stating what's going on here. I understand what you're saying, and the scope of this is pretty gigantic. I don't quarrel that point at all. But we're kind of at that point now where the hearing has to close.
Yeah, and closing the public hearing doesn't mean that we can't go over the information further and hash that out amongst ourselves. It just means we can't receive further information.
Right, but
So-
the context comes often from the experts.
I agree, but unless we can put together an articulable point to say, hey, we need more time with this public hearing. We could ask the applicant, say, can we please keep it open? I don't know what their answer would be, but
Yeah.
it would
So
be
it's like-
stronger with
I see both sides.
a
It's
point.
like right now we can't really think of anything that we need further clarity on specifically, but we do need time to go through the mountain of paperwork and reports and the whole thing.
Well,
Filter it all through, but if we do that, we're definitely going to have more questions.
Well, and relative also to what we've heard from the public over the 3 meetings, because some of the stuff is outside of our venue, some of it's in the conservation side, so it's going to go up through to zoning on that side. And we haven't really articulated back yet what that will be, because back from what we heard on that. And then there are some pieces that we started to think about that really are impacting the wetland side. and I guess as if this is the end, I'm just going around asking each of the commissioners what they're thinking. So I picked on that side of the room for a while.
So my question would be, if we do close the public hearing, I know we can't get new information, but can we get clarifying information from the third party and applicant after the public hearing?
So under the complex application, the third party independent reviewer is an extension of staff.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
That helps me.
Okay, that helps a lot. I did not know that, so that's good.
So in that case, that would be okay.
Okay, let's move to close the public hearing.
My second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Moving forward with the agenda real quick, no Conservation Commission business, no Asian actions. Then last is adjournment. I'll entertain a motion.
Yep.
Seconded. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Years, SCM has been the voice of our town.
Bringing us together through local programming,
Education, and live broadcasts.
SEM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community, ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings, and celebrating milestones
like our high school graduations.
But today, SEM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions. And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SEM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
We need your support.
We need your support.
We need your support.
Your donation can make a difference. It will ensure that SCM remains open.
Continues to educate our youth and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice. Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
for generations to come.
Visit our website
Or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media,
Where your town,
Your schools,
and your government come together.